Let's talk about some Thor, shall we? Although Thor is one of my favorite heroes in the MCU, this film was unfortunately boring and bland, with it being plagued right from the beginning. It had some production issues, hiring, firing, and rehiring castings, while swapping through directors like it was going out of style, but after all the smoke was cleared, they cast a great talent and a decent director, but absolutely flopped with the approach and final outcome. Although Thor can be a tough sell when it comes to making a film, the director had some cool ideas coming in, bringing the Shakespearean style to it, but due to a bland backstory and poor execution of the characters and script, this film ended up being fairly boring compared to some of the other films in the Phase 1 and in the MCU as a whole. For my money, the direction itself was a real telling for the way the rest of this film was going to go, being so messy and choppy. He utilized a few decent sweeping scenery shots, but the overabundance of Dutch angles really threw me off, leaving my neck physically in pain from tilting my head sideways constantly. As a whole, the shot selection was just a bit odd, most definitely being the most annoyingly shot film in the entire MCU. Then, when it came to the action scenes, they just had no personality to them, and same with the conversations. It was just shot, reverse shot. When it came to the effects, they didn't really seem to be handled or even age all that well, coming off looking like the cheapest film in the MCU with the green screens and the hooks that they used. This film was just truly doomed from the start. Thor had a good amount of potential to be at least decent, but it simply felt like another setup film flooded with bad exposition. With such a generic fish out of water story, the expositions were left underdeveloped and dry, while the tones are completely uneven. The first half hour is pretty good, seeming to be setting up something interesting, but come the rest of the 80 minutes, it dragged out at such a slow pace, relying on the characters to drive the film, and that just didn't work in this application because of the poor writing. From a standalone film perspective, Thor probably had the most talented cast, with Chris Hemsworth, Skarsgård, Natalie Portman, and the rest of them. All the team needed to do was make a coherent script to complement the characters, and they just couldn't do it. Most of these characters are pretty disposable, lacking charm, wit, humor, and just overall likability besides Chris Hemsworth. He seems like he was made for this role. At first, Hemsworth was denied the role of Thor, but he tried out again and then solidified his casting, which is a pretty cool nugget of information when you see how far he's come with the role. Hemsworth does bring a lot of charm and good comedic timing to the character, but he can overcook it at times, making Thor a little more over the top than usual, trying to ground him almost too much. With such a powerful hero, it's hard to make a solo film for him because he's just so strong that the risk really won't pay off, and that's the risk that the director wanted to take, and it didn't really quite pay off. The director tried to give him a character arc, but it was just so cliche, setting up for a predictable third act. Natalie Portman is such a talented actress, do not get me wrong, but she is one of the worst love interests in the MCU, solely because her relationship with Thor is so forced and underdeveloped. Her character is so boring and really almost dumb, I couldn't invest myself into her. This is Tom Hiddleston's intro to the saga, and although he isn't the full fleshed out Loki yet, he puts on one of the best performances of the film, having a good motive and great emotional connection to Thor. He sold all of his emotions seamlessly, making everything he did and say feel genuine. I was honestly really excited to hear that Anthony Hopkins was going to be in this film, and not just as a stupid side character, but as Odin. But other than him trying his best with great delivery, he basically just hung around the whole time, while Thor and Loki got all the best lines. When it came to the action, it really wasn't all that present, nor memorable at that. The only halfway decent action sequence that was there was the first battle. But other than that, the action was just meh, being a massive downfall considering the power of Thor and the build-up they were trying to go for. The production and scale of the film was also pretty weird. Asgard was ginormous, with all these vibrant colors that pop all over the screen, but when it came to when they were on Earth, the small town looked way too much like a movie set, being so dull and boring. I'm sure that was the point they were going for, to show how cool Asgard is, but it was a tough sell with dry New Mexico. Overall, it's like salt in an open wound to say, I didn't hate this film, but I also really didn't like it either. It had its moments here and there, but there was nothing that stood out to make this film stand out on its own or to hold its value. 4 out of 10 for me.